1,000 years of empire, legacy, and divine rule came crashing down in a single morning. The city of Constantine, once the brightest jewel of Christendom, the second Rome, the crossroads of civilization, fell under the relentless weight of change, steel, and ambition. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was not just the end of a city, it was the symbolic death of the ancient world and the explosive birth of a new age. What followed would reshape religion, politics, science, and the very geography of power for centuries to come. But to understand this seismic event, we must go back. We must walk through marble avenues, echoing chants of orthodox priests, and past imperial palaces overlooking the sparkling Bosphorus. We must enter a city that once defied the very idea of collapse. Constantinople, once Byzantium, was more than stone and mortar. It was the soul of an empire. When Constantine the Great, the first Christian emperor of Rome, reimagined this once minor Greek port city in 330 AD, he envisioned not just a new capital, but a new world. Positioned between Europe and Asia, blessed with natural defenses and thriving commerce, it stood as both a spiritual sanctuary and a political powerhouse. Its domes and mosaics dazzled. Its scholars preserved ancient knowledge, its generals repelled invaders from every direction. The city became a vault of Christian culture, Roman law, and Greek philosophy, and most of all, it endured. Waves of Persian cavalry, Arab fleets, Avar catapults, Bulgar horsemen, Rus raiders, and even Viking mercenaries had tried and failed to breach its mighty Theodosian walls. To the faithful, its endurance was proof of divine favor. To historians, it was the miracle of strategy, architecture, and geography. To its enemies, it was the final, untaken fortress of the classical world. But time is undefeated. By the mid-15th century, the once mighty Byzantine Empire was but a shadow. What was once a dominion stretching from Italy to Syria was now reduced to a fragile city-state surrounded by a sea of hostile forces. Years of dynastic feuds, civil wars, corrupt leadership, and misguided crusades had chipped away at its strength. The most humiliating blow came not from Muslims but from fellow Christians. In 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, Western European knights sacked Constantinople itself, plundering its holy relics, desecrating its churches, and weakening its political core beyond repair. Though the Byzantines retook the city decades later, the wound never truly healed. The empire limped through the next 2 centuries, its population dwindling, its economy faltering, and its enemies growing bolder. Meanwhile, a new star was rising from the east, the Ottoman Turks. Unlike their fractured European counterparts, the Ottomans were united, visionary, and absolutely determined. They had carved a mighty realm across Anatolia and the Balkans. Their armies were disciplined, their generals ambitious, and their sultans unrelenting. And at their head, in 1451, stood a young ruler who would soon make history, Mehmed II. Barely 21, Mehmed was no ordinary conqueror. Fluent in multiple languages, steeped in classical literature and Islamic philosophy, trained in both military science and diplomacy, he was a man with a mission. For him, Constantinople was not just a strategic city, it was a symbol, a throne of Caesars, a capital of empires, a test of greatness. If he could take Constantinople, he would not just expand his dominion, he would claim his place as the supreme ruler of East and West. Mehmed began preparing like no one before. He built new fortresses like Rumeli Hisari to control the Bosphorus and block aid from Eastern Europe. He expanded his navy, training sailors for river and sea combat. He recruited scholars, engineers, spies, and artisans. And perhaps most crucially, he hired Urban, a Hungarian engineer and master cannon maker who built the world's most terrifying weapon of the age, the basilica. a supercannon so large it took 60 oxen to move, and when fired, it could shatter stone walls from over a mile away. Though slow to reload, its psychological impact was devastating. By early 1453, Mehmed had gathered a massive force. Estimates vary, but it ranged between 80,000 and 100,000 men, including cavalry, archers, engineers, sappers, and the elite Janissary Corps. These Janissaries, taken as children, converted to Islam and trained as professional soldiers, were among the most feared warriors of the medieval world. They were disciplined, heavily armed, and fanatically loyal to the Sultan. Inside the walls, however, the situation was grim. Constantine XI Palaiologos, the last Byzantine emperor, stood as a noble but desperate leader. Brave, intelligent, and tragic, he commanded a city defended by fewer than 8,000 soldiers. They included Greek citizens, foreign mercenaries from Genoa and Venice, and volunteers who had answered the call to defend the ancient Christian bastion. But they had no real cavalry, little artillery, and no reinforcements. Their appeals to Western Europe went mostly unanswered. The Pope offered moral support, but political divisions and economic self-interest kept most Christian kingdoms from intervening. On April 6, 1453, the siege began. From day one, the bombardment was relentless. Cannons thundered day and night, hammering the Theodosian walls that had stood for over 1,000 years. These walls, multiple layers thick, with moats, towers, and bastions, had repelled invaders for centuries. City churches rang with prayers, clergy led processions through streets, icons were displayed along the ramparts. Hope clashed with fear. At sea, the defenders had one advantage: a massive iron chain stretched across the mouth of the Golden Horn, blocking Ottoman ships. But Mehmed, ever the strategist, stunned the defenders and the world by dragging his ships over land, across greased logs, and into the inner harbor, bypassing the chain and trapping the city from the sea as well. It was a masterpiece of logistics and a psychological blow to Constantinople's morale. Weeks turned into months. Food supplies dwindled. Diseases spread, mutinies nearly broke out. Meanwhile, inside Hagia Sophia, the grandest church of Eastern Christendom, people gathered by the thousands to pray, weep, and wait for a miracle that never came. At one point, strange lights were reported in the sky, a fiery glow above the dome, interpreted by some as angelic warning, by others as divine farewell. Then came the final day. On May 29, 1453, in the cold, early hours before dawn, Mehmed launched his final assault. The plan was brutal in its efficiency. First came the expendable irregulars, wild fighters meant to weaken the defenders' strength and exhaust their arrows and gunpowder. Then came the trained Ottoman infantry, storming the breaches with ladders, shields, and battering rams. The defenders held as best they could. Blood soaked the stones. Men screamed and banners fell. And then came the Janissaries. With surgical precision, they struck. Black-armored, silent, and organized, they surged forward under the Sultan's banner. At a critical moment, a small gate, the Kirkaporta, was either forgotten or forced open. Ottoman troops flooded in, panic spread, discipline broke, the defenders fought with valor, but they were overwhelmed. Emperor Constantine XI, refusing to flee, is said to have cast off his imperial robes, drawn his sword, and charged into the fray. He was never seen again. With his death, the Eastern Roman Empire ended. By morning, Constantinople had fallen, the gates were thrown open, the crescent flag of Islam rose above Hagia Sophia. Centuries of rule, tradition, and culture vanished in hours. Looting and violence followed, as was customary in the age. Churches were desecrated, palaces were ransacked, citizens were enslaved, but after 3 days, Mehmed entered the city in solemn triumph. He walked through streets filled with ash and silence. When he reached Hagia Sophia, he stopped. Entering the sacred space, now desecrated and bloodstained, he is said to have picked up a handful of dirt, let it fall, and whispered, "What a city we have given to ruin." Then, with reverence, he ordered the church preserved and converted into a mosque. It would become a symbol of the Ottoman Empire's religious tolerance and authority. Mehmed did not destroy the city, he rebuilt it. He repopulated it with Jews, Greeks, Armenians, Muslims. He established religious protections under the millet system, allowing various communities to govern their own affairs under Ottoman law. He transformed Constantinople into Istanbul, the capital of a new Islamic empire that would stretch across 3 continents. But for Europe, the shock was enormous. The fall of Constantinople was a dagger in the heart of Christian Europe. It sent waves of panic through Italy, France, and beyond. Refugees, scholars, monks, artists fled west, bringing with them ancient manuscripts, ideas, and technologies that would fuel the Renaissance. The printing press would soon spread these ideas farther than ever before. Meanwhile, with the Ottomans now controlling key trade routes to Asia, European powers began looking for alternative paths, leading eventually to the age of exploration. In less than 50 years, Portuguese and Spanish ships would reach India, Africa, and the Americas, fundamentally reshaping global history. In this sense, the fall of Constantinople indirectly led to the rise of modern Europe and the age of empires that would define the next 500 years. And yet, something profound was lost. The Roman Empire, in one form or another, had endured from 27 BC to 1453 AD, nearly 1500 years. Its fall was not just political, it was spiritual, cultural, civilizational. It marked the passing of an age when emperors ruled by divine right, when cities were built in marble, and when the wisdom of Plato, Aristotle, and Augustine guided the soul of nations. Today, the echoes of Constantinople live on, in Istanbul's skyline, in the architecture of Europe, in Orthodox liturgy, in legal systems, in literature, and in the collective memory of East and West. The city fell, but its story never did.